Welcome to Inform TV. I'm Alan Roebke, Alexandria, Minnesota. Today we've got Tom Barrett from the Minnesota Gambling Control Board. Tom, introduce yourself a little bit. We've had nothing but technical difficulties, so he's the most patient man in state government today.
Well, thanks, Alan. No problem. Sorry you're having trouble with it. Yeah, this is Tom Barrett. I'm the director of the Gambling Control Board for Minnesota.
And what we're going to do today for my audience and people of Minnesota a little bit, we're going to go to your website, Tom, and I guess we're going to start from a standpoint of our audience. Here on Wednesday the 19th, you had rolled out probably on Tuesday the new video pull tab system. And we want to talk about that a little bit. Reading the article in the Star Tribune, people I know are wondering, okay, we want to do like Mr. Garcia from St. Paul. He wanted to help the stadium out. Which game do you play? You play the electronic ones or the traditional pull tabs? Or isn't there any difference?
Alan, actually it's both games. And here, let me explain, because right now charitable gaming contributes about $38 million a year to the state in the way of charitable gaming tax, where there's a tax on the pull tabs and bingo and the like. With this new allowance for electronic pull tabs, that's added to the mix. But once the charities pay that first $38 million into the state, anything that comes in beyond that amount will be dedicated to the bonding for the Vikings Stadium.
So basically it's a fallacy if anybody thinks if they pick up the new electronic ones they're supporting the stadium. If they think that they don't want to support the stadium, just local charities, they play the pull tabs. That's not the way it works.
No, and actually it all goes kind of in the mix. And then what the expected increase in play, that's where the expected increase in tax receipts will go towards the bonding. So
now you said traditionally, or is in 2011, would that be an example that the state took in about $38 million? Is that right, Tom?
Correct. That was based on approximately gross sales of just under $1 billion.
Okay, and kind of the way I'm looking at it, the state wants to take in about what, another $39 million, excuse me, for gaming. Is that right?
Yeah, again, depending upon what the interest rates on the bonds when they're issued, but for practical purposes, they're targeting where the tax receipts to the state would pretty much double in terms of anticipated revenue.
So conceivably, we would have to go from the present $1 billion worth of gaming that we had. In fact, it was a little less in 2011. If I look at the right report, it would have to go to $2 billion. Is that right?
Yes. Again, with the expected allowance for these electronic games, some of the interest with the tax changes that were also included in the bill, there's the expectation that the increased revenue from this gaming format, in addition to the increased attention on charitable gaming, that they'll see those kind of numbers. Okay,
that's what I was getting at, and trying to get our audience to understand that. What else do they need to know about the new system as far as for it to be functional, so to speak?
Well, again, this launch started last Tuesday, just based on what we've been tracking on these initial locations. The sales have actually been a little better than we anticipated. Now, that's a very small capsule picture, the novelty of these new gaming formats, but as the games roll to additional locations, we expect to see the same kind of interest. Now, to the extent that they attract a different player or a different style of play, that remains to be seen. But so far, based on the initial rollout, the numbers look interesting. We heard from a number of bar locations the next day wanting to know when they could have these type devices in their locations. So our encouragement, the board doesn't dictate what sites get the new format. That's strictly and always been up to the charity pretty much a local charity working cooperatively with the local bar owner.
I went to your annual reports as you were talking, and it shows gross receipts in 2000 were 1.4 billion, and they continued to trend down through 10 and 11 of just a little less than $1 billion, Tom. So from a practical standpoint, if the state is going to get the 37 to 39 billion for the Vikings Stadium, there's no question charitable gaming has to double in the state, right?
Yeah, now real quick, you said 37 billion, but it's million.
Million, excuse me. Excuse me.
But yeah, they are looking at that kind of increase. And knowing, going to the annual report you referred to, yeah, we did see a slight uptick, 1% increase. Things kind of bottomed out, per se, back in fiscal year 10. But if you go back in that history, you can certainly see in the numbers where it was a $1.4 billion industry. Then different things happened. I know a smoking ban came into play in Minnesota around that time, and that's where we saw a decrease. But we haven't produced the fiscal year 12 report yet, but the initial numbers, gross sales are up over $1 billion. So it's kind of back on the rise for maybe a couple of different reasons. Maybe the economy is getting better, what have you. But we're starting to see an uptick in the charitable gaming industry.
Okay, that from a standpoint of, were you involved in any of the projections or anything, the Gambling Control Board for the process, or did you guys stay out of that?
No, we were definitely involved, and that was some of the concern we had too, because nowhere in the country is the model that was proposed in Minnesota happening anywhere else. There's different similarities in different states, whether it was under the lottery, a different state lottery, or different machine type. But when it came down to how things were shaken out in the legislation in terms of portable handheld devices for use for pull-tab games, but also linked bingo games, which we haven't talked about, but that's another new game format that is yet to roll out. We're working with a number of vendors in that respect. But we took these ingredients that were in the bill as what was allowed for charitable gaming. But we factored in the number of sites. So as I mentioned, I think earlier, there's about 2,800 locations currently conducting some form of gaming, primarily pull-tabs. Pull-tabs make up about 93% of the gross sales. But there's also bar bingo, there's raffles, the meat raffles, the tip board tickets, those things.
Go ahead.
For the most part, there's 2,800 locations, so we factored in how many of those sites would be interested in jumping on board with an electronic format, and that number was pared down to 2,500. We didn't think all sites would get on board with the electronic gaming. And from there, there's a limit in the number of devices that are at each site, and it's based on the seating capacity. So we got the total number of estimated sites, we got a seating capacity limitation, number of devices, but ultimately we came up with a formula showing the estimated number of devices, the time of day, the average wager. So there's a whole bunch of ingredients that went into the formula to kind of project out. Once we came out with some estimates, we also touched base with some of the industry experts out there that are familiar with this style of play and asked them for some input. And their response was that the methodology that we used was good, but they also pointed out it might be conservative.
From a standpoint of my audience is looking, and unfortunately I can't find it here. You guys give a monthly report, and it says GCB monthly reports. How do I get to that to show what's come in this year so far?
Well, in terms of what's come in this year so far, I'm not sure what you're looking at.
There was a newsletter maybe that I looked at. Where would I find that newsletter, Tom?
Oh, okay. If you go into gaming news.
Is that, I need to go back to maybe to the front page and.
Yeah, go to the front page, click links, and click on gaming news.
That's what I'm probably looking. There you go. Because I went to. It's kind of confused.
Bi-monthly or so newsletter.
Yeah, that's what I was looking for.
Okay. Anyway, there you could go back for be it July, August, September 2012, and we do routinely updates in that respect. There's other reports that are available for your viewers if they're interested to understand what's going on. If you go back to our main page and go out, click on the annual reports.
Okay, and that I was there already, and that's where I talked about the other numbers. But what I was trying to get at here is to show people where they could see what's taken place this year. I guess I got them up here for my audience now, Tom, where it's showed in January you're up 7.5%, 13% in February, 7% in March, April. But the numbers only go through May. Do you have, or through April? Do you have any new updated numbers for us you can tell us about?
Not exactly, and the reason that we're dependent right now under this, because this was primarily the paper games that we were tracking, and we were dependent on our counterparts over at revenue. So once the charity at the end of the month, they have until the 20th of the following month to file their reports with revenue, and then it takes revenue another month or two to get all that data entered in the system. So unfortunately there's a time lag from the time the charity reports their monthly activity to revenue and from the time revenue puts the data in. They're working on an online reporting, which they're not there yet. But anyway, that's the latest we got right now. The next group of numbers will be ready for our next newsletter, but we're still waiting for revenue to confirm those audited figures.
When will those numbers come to you think, from revenue?
Well, we normally get our annual reports prepped and ready to go for legislative review around November.
Okay.
Because that'll give the charities, if they've filed amended returns, to get the most accurate and final detail. So that's what we're looking at in terms of final numbers for fiscal year that just ended June.
One of the other things, and part of the delay I had with you today, Tom, was I was trying to get a hold of, first I went to the Senate office, and then they directed me to Supreme Court. In this process, have you looked at all on the legislative agenda where they've got some new data as far as, can you explain to my audience at all what this lawsuit that the state, part of this stadium process was to sue, was it the Supreme Court to make a ruling as for them to change some of the bonds that the state had before into a new form of bonds? Can you tell us anything about that, Tom?
Alan, unfortunately not. The Gambling Control Board's focus is strictly on the games themselves. I think what you're talking to about involves the bonding structure, the bond payment, and the use. So that's out of my realm of expertise. But counterparts, our friends over at Minnesota Management Budget, should be able to help you in that respect.
Okay. Anything else you want to tell my audience? You've been more than kind. We were going to start this at 10, and I see it's almost 10 minutes to 11 now. Anything else the people of Minnesota, outstate Minnesota here, need to know when they're doing charitable gambling or concerned about helping the Vikings Stadium when they do their gambling?
You threw a couple of things in. I think in terms of the games themselves and the integrity of operations, the focus of the Gambling Control Board is just to obviously maintain a very efficient, effective style of play, so the players can enjoy the experience and the charities can enjoy the proceeds, be it youth hockey, those kinds of things. As it relates to the Vikings Stadium, this is kind of the first time taxes from this activity were dedicated to what I would call the bricks and mortar. Normally they would pay the taxes to the state and the legislators would spend it wisely in different categories. But now obviously there's a lot of focus with the Vikings Stadium. So the board's neutral in terms of the tax policy and where the money goes. But I think it's important for the viewers to understand that we did have a great opportunity working with representatives from the charitable industry, from the bar industry, and also the electronic vendors and those manufacturers to really get a pretty good product out there. There's a lot of focus on Minnesota from other states in terms of, geez, if it works in Minnesota, we want to bring it on in our state. A good example is the state of Virginia. So we're trying our best to put out a very good game with the high integrity and standards that we expect here in Minnesota. But as always, if any of your listeners have issues or concerns as it relates to the way the games are played or some concerns about sites, we're certainly open. Give us a call. You got our website information there, so
just one
help in any way we can.
Okay, just one little bit of clarification then. If when it's all said and done for 2012, if gaming went up 10%, so revenue basically went from just a little bit less than $1 billion in 2011 and went to 1.1 billion in 2012. Would the charities get the same amount of money, or when do we start filtering from the charities getting money to the Vikings getting to money? Let's clarify that, Tom, before you let you go.
Yep, no problem. I think in your scenario, if gross receipts increase, everybody would benefit. And by that I mean, obviously there's more play for the players, but what ultimately is left after the 85% goes back to the player, there's the net receipts that are left, and so there's still the taxes to be paid, but if there's an increase in tax receipts, that'll certainly benefit the state. If there's an increase in the net receipts, that'll benefit the charities, again, be it youth hockey or fire relief to buy a local fire truck, or the cities. So it's kind of, as we see an increase in activity, the way that pie is distributed of the net receipts, the money after the prizes are paid out, everybody should benefit.
What if for, say, 5-year period here, we basically say about the same? So we, you mentioned before, the tax revenue has been about $37 to $38 million for the state on this tax end. From a standpoint, because I'm confused on it myself, as you can understand here. The charities are still going to get the money. The state is going to get $37 to $38 million per year. But if it's going to fund the stadium, and what do the tax proceeds need to do? Double?
Well, yeah. If there's to pay for the bonding, the expectation is the activity would almost double in order to first hit the first benchmark, the regular tax receipts the state's been used to. After that, it's whatever comes in extra would be used for the bonding. Now, should that fall short, there's other provisions in the bill for what they call the blink-on provisions, whether it's a special lottery ticket or a tax on the luxury suite. So there's some fallback in case the revenue projections don't come in as planned. But the proceeds are not coming from the charities. They're still going to be able to see an increase in their use of the net proceeds for their own mission.
And it's just the tax, and so conceivably, if the revenue goes double, the charities will get double. And
yeah, I mean, potentially, yes. We expect with this electronic format there should be some efficiencies. You're not hiring extra staff; it's all still the one seller. So there's some opportunity to improve, reduce expenses, so to speak, and get more to the bottom line.
Because what I was getting at, the Star Tribune had this article where this Mr. Gazzara, a Vikings fan, and he said, "I don't gamble ever," said Gazzara, 41 of St. Paul, "but to help the team, I'll spend a little money. We're going to use the stadium. We're going to play the games." To really get some money for the stadium, he's going to have to be continue to be a gambler, right?
Well, I mean, yeah, that's his method of helping the team, but I'm sure the state would be more than willing to take a direct payment as well.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at. And conceivably, he's going to have to wage quite a few dollars at only the 4% tax. If a good Viking fan out there wants to fund the stadium and not get involved in the gambling end at all, he or she should probably just write the check, state a check for $100 or $500, right?
thoughts and whatever they want to do.
Because that's kind of what I was getting at. There's been, and you're not the villain. I want my audience to understand Tom is not the villain. He's doing a great job of running his end of the business. But there was all. First, we were going to expand the gaming at the racetracks, and the politicians, a bunch of them said, no, we're not going to do that. But there's no question when I look at this, the stadium is going to be, at least its plan is to be funded by gaming, right?
You're kind of funded by the proceeds from charitable gaming, yes.
Yeah, and so my audience doesn't get confused like myself. It really has nothing to do with whether you win, lose, or draw when you're at the local Eagles out here or out Interlaken where I go for supper when I got a little money in my pocket and watch people do pull tabs. And I don't think anybody in Alexandria has got the new system yet. It really just relates down back to if gross revenue goes up, the state, and this tax is based on what, 4.3% or what percent, Tom?
No, I'm not sure what you're quoting, the 4.3%, but there's what they call a combined receipt tax on charitable gaming.
Explain that, yeah.
Charities take in, the bigger the charity is in terms of gross receipts and net receipts, the higher the tax rate is they pay. If it's a small charity, they pay a smaller fee, but you'd have to go to get directly to the tax tables as it relates to the Minnesota tax on charitable gaming.
One of the other things that I looked at on there, we're in Forum TV here, and we're very critical of government, trying to get the executive branch to administer things and the legislator to legislate and even get down to one body of legislators. But what I'm getting at here now, I also read on the electronic gaming, someplace, either your site or someplace I went to, the electronic one still doesn't send the money directly to the state. It still goes, the local charity still deposits it in their local bank account, and then does the state get that revenue, or your gaming board get the revenue right away because of electronics? I'm trying to bring the accounting up, whether it's pull tab or not. I think we should have all this stuff easily within 30 days. But tell us, is the accounting and money coming to you and to the revenue, the state revenue board that handles our finances? Are these electronic games going to increase that much, Tom?
Okay, a couple of things. If you want to get into the accounting reports,
yep.
Every charity that's licensed in conducting charitable gaming, be it paper or electronics, they're required to track all their monthly activity, all the gross sales, prizes paid, their expenses. At the end of the month, when they close out their activity, they're required to file with the state, the Department of Revenue, by the 20th of the following month, all the tax reporting indicating what happened at Joe's Bar and in total for the charity. So if a charity's got more than one site, they have to obviously multiply the number of sites they have for each form that's needed. But ultimately and monthly, every charitable organization conducting gambling is required to report to the state what their previous month's activity was. At that time, based on their activity, they are paying to the state the taxes due. So these are updated every month from approximately 1,200 organizations. So in terms of, I think the answer to your question is, how often are the charities paying the state? They're paying monthly.
Okay, and for right now, we're just about at the end of September. As far as when will that money actually come to the state then? Will it come in October or not till November?
For the month of September, the charities are required to report to the Department of Revenue by the 20th of the following month. So for September's activity, they would report by October 20th.
Okay. And so conceivably, if the Department of Revenue was using a modern accounting system or whatever, we should, by the 1st of November, back to the chart I'm looking, we conceivably should have a report of how many gross dollars were spent, how much change from 2011, the whole 9 yards, and kind of have a modern accounting system if they were following that. And would the electronic portion, will that get the info to the revenue board, the revenue people any quicker? That's kind of what I get in my next question, Tom.
Yeah, we're not asking them to report anything separately. So whether it's paper or electronic sales, all that is included in the regular monthly report.
Okay, and I know one night I was out here at the Interlaken and having a meal, and they were kind of understaffed that night, and poor Kat, the bar and restaurant manager that evening, she was just being kind of overloaded. The people were in there were playing, gaming big time. It looked to me like there should be a system that helps the local bar patron record this and handle it better. You mentioned something on that when we first started talking here. What are you doing to help the local charities and bars that handle this so this information gets to the state revenue department easier?
Yeah, and depending upon how the charity wants what they want to do with the data that's available, but this new electronic format does afford the charities more opportunities to do quicker reporting in terms of simply inventory control. There's no tickets, annual tickets to count. It's all electronically kind of summarized at day's end or month end. So in that respect, it'll be easier for the charity to report the activity from the electronic games as opposed to the paper. But paper is still going to be allowed to be played and encouraged. So there'll still be the issues of reporting in that respect. But ultimately, the charity's got to report all proceeds from all games on a monthly basis to revenue.
What do you find on reporting? Does what percentage of charities tend to, like I said, we used the example here before, September. By the first week in October, what percentage of the reporting is in? Second week and third week, or do most places wait right till the 20th of the following month to report?
Well, as we usually find, work expands the time allowed, Alan. So, unfortunately, the majority of the charities wait until the 20th of the month before they file.
Yeah, that's
right now, this is all manual paper file.
Yeah.
There's no allowance for electronic filing with the Department of Revenue. Once it gets to revenue, then they have to manually enter all the data. So there is, unfortunately, a time lag. So while the reports are due the 20th of the following month, there's still the issue of the data entry to get that information into the system. So while it would be great to have all that info ready October 1, that in reality that doesn't happen, unfortunately. But they're working on a new system. Some of the charities are welcoming the opportunity to report online, but we're not there yet.
That's what I was getting at. You know, we're in an election cycle here, and we're trying to tell people around the outstate Minnesota where they get Informed TV of one of the great downfalls in both federal government, and this is not any reflection on you, Tom. You're doing a great job for us and your gaming board. But what I'm getting at is I see this in every level of government, whether it's city, county, state, federal, that the accounting system is so out of touch with what the average business is doing, and yet they tend to make 10-year projections rather than 5 that Caterpillar just had out today, yet the business community was criticizing them as a 5-year projection was too long, yet everything in the federal government's based on 10-year projections and that type of thing. So what I'm getting at is I hope we can get some new accounting, some real pressure on the election cycle out here in outstate Minnesota to get our candidates to be talking about getting somebody to administer our state rather than everybody trying to see that they get their will, whether it's the administrative branch or the legislative branch. Tom, we're running out of time here. We're getting down 20 seconds. Anything else you want to tell the people outstate Minnesota?
No, I just appreciate the opportunity to tune in and give some hopefully helpful information. So I appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks a lot, Tom, and I want to thank our audience as usual for listening to Inform TV. I'm Alan Roebke, Alexandria, Minnesota. Welcome to Inform TV. I'm Alan Roebke, Alexandria, Minnesota. Today we're coming back with an additional program on September 25th, 2012, and it continues to relate to the Vikings Stadium bonds. This morning about 11 o'clock, the Gambling Control Board Executive Director Tom Barrett talked to me about some clarification for a full program, a half-hour program that'll also be on Charter and ARVIG. If you have some friends to listen on that, it should be for your Charter friends. It should be at 6:30 in the morning and 7:30 in the evening on Channel 3 Charter. And hopefully we're soon going to have a channel with Charter if I can get through all the bureaucracies and things I don't need to pay for because I'm way ahead of them. But anyway, that's part of the challenge of here of an independent TV source in today's marketplace, where big and bigger is the only driving force. But anyway, we're still on the air, and got a little change in my pocket yet, but we're out of cash as usual. But hopefully a little money's coming in on Wednesday. We'll see if it does. If it doesn't, you might not see us again, but I think we'll be here. Anyway, what I want to talk to you in this segment that'll probably just go on Selective TV, and that's the sad part of not having a channel on Charter. This morning, as I said before, we did an excellent piece, and now there's some buzz in the sound. I had some issues with the phone I had here, so I had to jump to my cell phone, and I clicked the volume up one notch too much the way it looks, but it's still very readable, and it's a piece everybody in the state of Minnesota should see, especially the churches, and especially the groups that were saying we don't want to expand gambling in this process of building a stadium, and it's bad policy to let the horse tracks be involved in expanded gaming. Well, the reality is, people, what's happened with our governor and our legislator, they've expanded gaming potential, at least, big time in the neighborhoods. And if you, once again, think about pieces of the puzzle in my comments here, you'll remember when I criticized that. If we're going to have gaming, I'm for a free society. Definitely put it in the horse tracks there. And I criticized the agreement when the state allowed my old friend Curtis Sampson family there at Canterbury Park of cutting a deal with one tribe, when in reality the backup financing for sure, or maybe the financing itself should have been there. So if anybody chooses to gamble, they've got to get in a car or ride the bus down to one of the two tracks in Minnesota, or even have a limited gaming casino in downtown Minneapolis, the Block E deal. They wanted to put a casino there, at least for the guests of hotels and that kind of thing. I don't think the general public should be allowed in a downtown one, more of an entertainment venue for business people in the hotels there. Because once again, I'm not in favor of any more expanding and gaming in the neighborhoods. But if you listen to this program that I did with Tom, and he was very gracious, and nothing negative on him or his board at all, but it's a great show, so watch it. I don't even know how long this is going to go. I'm kind of rambling, but I think it's an important ramble. So what we're going to do in this process, if you listen to the program I had there, I brought up the Supreme Court on the funding of this, because in this law they wanted to change some bonding issues. And by changing it, it was kind of my understanding anyway, the big shots don't want to talk to a little guy like me, and that if they would do something with the tobacco bond and some appropriation bonds. I'm going to try to read a little bit here for you, but as you know, I graduated in the lower third of my class, and to get into college, the law firm of Waking, Johnson, and Pazdernick was able to make sure that my high school transcript never got in the hands of the University of Minnesota. In fact, annually they still ask me for my transcript from my high school days, so I think that tells you a lot. But anyway, I didn't ever learn to read and write. I just kind of absorbed things and numbers, I understand. But anyway, what we're looking at here is the Supreme Court actually finally called me back after I got done talking to Tom there on this issue, and they said tomorrow, we're talking the 25th here, what is it, Tuesday today, on Wednesday, the appellate court is going to either hear or make a ruling on this bond package that's part of this financing for the stadium, but it's kind of an indirect financing. It's too bad I didn't have the camera on when I was talking to this guy at Supreme Court. He would have really raised some eyebrows, laughed, and shook your head and agreed and not agreed at all, but whatever. So more info on financing from our earlier program. That's kind of what I'm throwing out there to you right now, and my goal, of course, if I can ever get this thing to cash flow a little bit, is to have professionals read the kind of things that I want to tell you about. And me doing maybe 1 shot a day or 3 shots a week on some of the issues that I follow, but maybe find some professional that can put it in a form that normal people can understand. And anyway, and I want you to read this yourself. That would be my goal. But the problem is, I search so many avenues on a constant basis that I can never remember where all I've been and where I found this and where did that piece of the puzzle come from. But anyway, it's chapter 2 in some of the state law stuff, and I'll try to post it on informtv.com. It's not going to be done today, but hopefully tomorrow, as you're watching this and the charter people hear that piece with Tom Barrett. Excellent piece. A little hiss on the mic because I had the volume turned up on my cell phone. But anyway, this relates to the Minnesota Vikings football stadium. And I'm just going to read my clumsy English, little clips here and there. Stadium financing. Cost to construct this stadium is expected to be $975 million. The Minnesota Vikings will contribute $477 million, the state will contribute $348 million, and the city of Minneapolis will contribute $150 million to the upfront construction costs. The state will issue bonds on behalf of the city of Minneapolis. The state will issue bonds on behalf of the city of Minneapolis, will repay the state the net present value of its share of the construction costs over a 30-year time frame beginning in 2021. Now here's some of the funny math, so to speak. In other words, the city is going to be able to keep some of that convention center money to, what is it, overhaul the Target Center and improve the convention center a little bit. So they're getting kind of a 10-year grace period in there, where it's my understanding that the state is going to make the payments for them and will catch up later, so to speak. And then it goes on to say, to pay for the stadium construction costs, the state will issue appropriation bonds and use the bond proceeds to pay for the state and city share of the upfront construction costs. That total bond issue will be $498 million. And remember, when you watched our segment with candidate Rick Rosenfield, we talked about some of this stuff in a number of issues, whether it's school, forcing the schools to borrow in behalf of the state of Minnesota. Is some of this stuff constitutional? So it's going to be interesting tomorrow, and that's why I'm bringing this little clip up for you guys on Selective TV, and sad I can't get it out further than that. But it's going to be heard in the court tomorrow, and I sent an email just a few minutes ago to the Office of Management and Budget, which was instructed to sue the state on behalf of some bond changes. At least that's my interpretation, the layman's process on it. But anyway, the appropriation bonds are to be sold by the state and will require annual general fund appropriations to pay debt service on the bonds. The act allows the Commissioner of Management and Budget, and we talked about that with our program with on the Gaming Commission with Tom, so make sure you hear that. Management Budget to file a complaint, with the Minnesota Supreme Court for an expedited validation of appropriation bonds, whatever that means. The validation process of appropriation bonds by the Supreme Court is described in greater detail in the summary section of this report. And then it goes on to say, I hope you're still with me, as with any bond issue, the actual credit rating, interest rate cost, and costs over the term of the bond will ultimately be determined by market conditions at the time of the bond sale. Nevertheless, the legislation dictated several criteria of this bond sale, including the term of the bond issue is 30 years. The bond issue shall not exceed $600 million. So with dirt cheap interest, the state probably could just borrow $600 million rather than $500 million, my thought process anyway. And because of the nature of the appropriation bond financing mechanism, the state's full faith and credit will not be pledged. And that to me sounds really stupid, because we're going to be on the hook for it somehow, some way, but maybe they're implying we're not. And but the reality is, you get my drift anyway. And then I'm just going to throw a little bit more of my clumsy reading to you. State contribution. Increased revenues enacted as part of Chapter 299 will be used to facilitate the construction cost of the stadium. Those increased revenues from the authorization of electronic pull tabs and electronic link bingo, and a slightly offsetting overall decrease in charitable gaming tax rates. Now that's important. Once again, when you listen to this half-hour piece both on Charter and Selective TV with Tom Barrett from the Gaming Board, that authorization is expected to increase the general fund revenues relative to the February forecast by $35 million in fiscal 13. And it's my understanding we're in fiscal 13 right now, and it'll end, what is it, the 1st of July of next year. And so what's interesting once again, we're putting pieces of the puzzle. I'm no smoothie. We're putting pieces of the puzzle together for you, the listeners of Informed TV, you, the taxpayers of Minnesota that are concerned about what's going on in government. They're saying in this forecast, this gaming increase that Tom and I talked about is going to come on immediately. And I don't think that's going to happen. It may come on over time, and you have to understand some of the financing of the people that are involved in this is based on inflation. And the old story I talk here about agriculture, so when I started looking at some of this stuff, the ag budget, the national ag budget, always gives a baseline. And basically they were showing that their projections, and I don't think they're right, nobody has a 10-year bubble. You remember that commercial on TV? They asked this genius, what's the interest rate going to be in 2 years? It's the same thing on GDP. In 10 years, nobody knows, especially with the disastrous economics we're dealing with right now. But anyway, what I'm getting at here is that's showing that in 10 years, the economy will be about 50% bigger. And which means that this whole financing of this stadium and these bonds and this gaming is going to be pushed by the fact that Bernanke bucks, funny money, the incredible power of these mini monopolies in every single industry is just going to keep taking more out of your pocket, even though you as a common worker, the average citizen that I'm trying to represent here, you're probably not going to get a raise or spendable money that allows you to do what even you're doing today. But anyway, that's a little background on what I'm trying to say here in this authorization thing. And that authorization is expected to, once again, in February 2012, the forecast was to increase it by 35.2 million in fiscal 13 and 57.9 million annually thereafter. And this money, if you listen, is a tax on gaming. And once again, when we talked with Tom, for this system to work at all, charitable gaming in the Eagles Club that I belong to, and just as a social member, they do a great job. I told them I'd belong, but I won't interfere at all with your business. I'll come in and have a burger and a beer once in a while and give you a little money if you ever start making something. And your community that has gaming, whether it's in Carlos or Garfield or so on and so forth around the area, around the state. And it's expected to grow to 58 million annually thereafter. And then it goes on to say, a portion of this revenue will be appropriated from the general fund to pay the debt service on appropriation bonds under Chapter 299 and for a number of other expenditures authorized by the enabling legislation, including appropriations from compulsive gambling grants, sales tax exemption for construction materials. Did you hear that? Sales tax exemption for construction materials. I presume that's for the stadium. And an appropriation to the city of St. Paul for financing sports facilities at that city. In addition, the city's share of the operating and capital reserve costs will be covered by this revenue stream from the year in which the stadium opens through fiscal 2020. Now, the interesting thing about this deal with St. Paul, they're struggling to pay for the XL Center, a wonderful facility, and anybody's been there but they're struggling for whatever reason to pay for the thing. And now what's happening? Those rich guys that are the biggest benefactor of that, the hockey league, look at the kind of salaries we paid for these two new players. And now they're on strike because they're fighting over this gigantic purse between the players and owners. You get a little drift of why I'm scratching my head of putting expanded gaming in the neighborhoods rather than at the horse tracks and that kind of thing. But anyway, And we're running out of time in a half an hour already, and I thought I was going to do this in 10 minutes. But anyway, here's the portion of the court system, and I haven't heard my computer bleep, so I sent for a couple of emails, so we're back on it. And I'm going to trip through this in the next few minutes, and then I'll sign off here. Validation process for appropriation bonds, and that's what's going to be in the court tomorrow. The appeals court, I think it is, the guy told me. During the past 2 legislative sessions, the state authorized the sale of appropriation bonds in 3 instances. And that's what this lawsuit stuff is all about. In 2011, the state authorized appropriation bonds to cover a projected shortfall in the general fund in fiscal 2012 and 13. These bonds are tied to the state's ongoing payments from the 1998 tobacco litigation settlement and were discussed in detail in the 2011 Fiscal Review. Also in 2011, the state authorized appropriation bonds to fund programs under the Minnesota Pay for Performance Act, and isn't that something with our school teachers? Finally, in 2012, the state authorized appropriation bonds to pay construction costs for a new Minnesota Vikings Stadium. These bonds are tied to revenues associated with electronic pull tabs and electronic link bingo. And that's why I did the program today with Tom. Prior to 2011, the state had previously issued appropriation bonds because the Minnesota construction limits the state's ability to sell bonds, and since appropriation bonds are a new type of bonds, laws are enacted in 11 and 12 that established a validation process to determine the constitutionality of each of these bond issuances through an expedited review by the Minnesota Supreme Court. The validation process is initiated by the filing of a lawsuit by the Commissioner of Management and Budget. The Commissioner has filed such a suit with respect to the tobacco bonds, and in August 2012, the state Supreme Court will hear oral arguments on the matter. You maybe followed that better than I have. A final discussion is anticipated by this decision by the state Supreme Court sometime in autumn, and then we're in that process. If the court holds that the appropriation bonds are valid, appropriation refunding bonds would be issued at a lower interest rate than the revenue bonds sold in 2012 that were backed by payments from the 1998 settlement of the state's lawsuit against tobacco companies. Proceeds of the sale of the appropriation bonds would be used to refund the revenue bonds, thereby saving the state an estimated $220 million over 20 years. In other words, this has got to be part of the stadium funding package besides the bingo deal. If the tobacco appropriation bonds are held invalid, these savings would not be realized. So then, boys and girls, you better game. If the court holds that the tobacco bonds are valid, the Commissioner of Management and Budget is not required to initiate the validation process for the pay for performance bonds or the stadium bonds. If the court holds the tobacco bonds are invalid, and if the ruling is framed to have bold application to all appropriation bonds, the pay for performance bonds and the stadium bonds will not be issued, and the proceeds anticipated from these sales will not be available for the pay-for-performance program. In other words, it's got to be education, or to cover stadium construction costs. That's why I want you to read it. And that's why I'm kind of adding my desperation expressions here. And while you're doing that, I got to see how much time I've got left. I can't believe it, but I think I'm out of time. Hold on. Today we're at the Senex station here in Alexandria that's got a convenience store with hot stuff pizza, coffee, all the traditional items of a good convenience store. You can see they've got unleaded gas, E85, diesel, and with a blended diesel where you can get, as the various temperatures change, you can get whatever mix you want. And this is one of the Senex stores in Minnesota, run by an incredible manager, Lane, that still understands that cooperatives are to be run where the customer is the company. And with Form TV, we're really happy to have some support from them, but always none of our customers have any input or take any sides. They just want people to have different viewpoints. But make sure you buy some gas from our friends here in Senex in Alexandria. They have a full service of different products. In fact, I'll give you a quick little look at what I was talking about as far as the different blends as winter comes on. If you have a diesel car or a truck or semi, you can come into Senex here and get number 1 diesel fuel, a 60-40 mix, a 40-60 mix, a 20-80 mix, or straight number 2. So it's set up right. I've talked to a lot of the semis that stopped here and they say this is the way to buy diesel fuel. And then they also have a Senex car care center here, and we're doing this on a Saturday, and they are open, taking care of their customers. So if you need bulk fuel, new tires, a tune-up, make sure you stop in the local Senex store here in Alexandria. They do a great job of understanding that in a co-op, the customer is the company, as well as 3 LP trucks here. Unfortunately, I'm going against the sun, but you need LP for your cabin or your home or your drying corn or whatever it may be. This is a great place to stop. You'll always get courteous service. You'll have what you need. And if you've got kids going to school in the area, I would recommend that you set up an account with them because Lane knows how to take care of people.